Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, so for the last, couple of years now, the whole story around generative AI, it's felt relentlessly apocalyptic, haven't it?
It really has. A constant stream of doom, almost.
Ever since ChatGPT dropped back in November 2022, it's just been this constant drumbeat, massive job losses coming, immediate displacement, whole sectors just gone overnight.
Yeah, complete erasure. It's become tech's favorite doomsday clock, really.
Exactly. But, the hype, the fear,
Hmm.
and frankly, some of the rhetoric, it often runs way ahead of the actual data, right?
Way, way ahead. That's often the case with these big tech shifts.
So today we're going to try and cut through some of that noise. We've got a really foundational piece of research here, a groundbreaking new study from Yale University's Budget Lab.
And this study, it really challenges that entire catastrophic narrative.
Yeah.
Like head on. The core finding is, well, it's pretty shocking, honestly, especially when you think about all the anxiety we've kind of internalized.
Shocking how? What did they find?
So the Yale researchers, they analyzed 33 months of labor market data. That's like over 2.5 years after AI really hit the public consciousness. And their conclusion, AI has had essentially zero impact on overall employment trends so far.
Zero impact. Wow. That's a big statement.
It is. They state quite bluntly, actually, that the widespread anxiety we're all feeling is largely speculative.
Okay, zero impact. That's powerful. We definitely need to unpack this. So our mission for this deep dive then is to really follow Yale's work step by step. How did they measure things? How did they reach that conclusion when everyone else is predicting collapse?
Right. And importantly, if AI isn't the big bad wolf right now, what is causing the job market to feel so, well, challenging? Because it certainly does feel challenging for many people.
Absolutely. Okay, let's start with the study scope and their methodology, because this wasn't just like a quick online poll.
No, not at all. This was an extensive analysis looking at 33 months of detailed job market data. They were tracking employment patterns across different industries, different demographic groups.
And the key factor you mentioned was exposure, worker exposure to AI.
Exactly. That concept of worker exposure is really the foundation of their whole argument. To try and measure the risk objectively, they divided the entire American workforce into 3 distinct groups.
Okay.
This was based on job tasks and how susceptible those tasks are to automation by current AI, particularly large language models. It's how they tried to see if AI was actually, eating away at certain parts of the labor force.
Makes sense. So what are the 3 groups?
Right. So first, you have the high exposure workers. These are the jobs identified as, well, most susceptible to automation. Think about cognitive roles, information-heavy jobs, maybe paralegals, certain kinds of middle management, data entry, even some early career coding tasks.
The ones everyone's been worried about.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Then you have the middle exposure group. These are jobs where maybe some tasks get automated, but it's not their core function, moderately affected. And third, the low exposure workers. Think plumbers, nurses, jobs requiring a lot of physical presence or complex interpersonal skills that AI isn't really touching yet.
Right, makes sense. So they tracked these 3 groups, high, middle, low, for 33 months. What did that actually show them?
Well, here's the key finding, the one that really drives that zero impact conclusion. It's the stability of the workforce composition. Meaning they looked at the percentage of workers in each of those 3 categories over time, high, middle, and low. And if AI was triggering mass job elimination in those vulnerable roles,
You'd expect the high exposure slice of the pie to shrink noticeably.
exactly. You'd expect to see a significant, measurable decline in the share of the workforce doing those high exposure jobs. But the data just didn't show that.
It didn't know.
The distribution across all 3 categories, high, middle, low, remained, and this is their term, remarkably stable.
Wow. Remarkably stable.
Yeah, which is why they conclude that up to this point in the data, AI has been, quote, essentially a non-factor in those big macro employment trends.
Okay, so we have this huge technological shift. Supposedly the biggest thing since the internet, maybe bigger. But the hard data, at least according to Yale, suggests it's not yet really moving the needle on the overall structure of the job market.
Correct, at least not in a way that drastically changes the proportions of those exposure categories.
But that raises the obvious question then. If we aren't seeing this massive displacement yet, how does the pace of this AI introduction compare? Like compared to previous huge tech moments?
That's a crucial piece of context, absolutely, because it helps frame our expectations, doesn't it? Yale specifically looked at that. They compared the current situation to 2 other pivotal moments.
Clever.
First, 1984. They marked that as the widespread adoption of personal computers hitting the workplace, the dawn of the computer era, essentially.
Right, PCs on desks everywhere.
And second, 1996, the big internet boom, fundamentally changing commerce, creating whole new digital industries.
Yeah, those were definitely disruptive times. I mean, we saw entire job roles change or disappear then too, right? Like
Hmm?
dedicated typists, maybe switchboard operators. But the economy didn't just, collapse.
Precisely. And that's the core of the comparison. Yale's analysis shows that AI's current rate of change, specifically in the labor force composition, how quickly the mix of job types is shifting, it actually matches the pace observed during the computer and internet revolutions.
It matches them, so it's not faster.
It's not accelerating past them based on this data. The disruption is happening, sure, but it seems to be unfolding at what looks like a historically standard pace for major technological integration.
Okay, that's really interesting because it directly clashes with so much of the rhetoric we hear, doesn't it?
It really does.
You have these really prominent CEOs like Anthropic's Dario Amodei warning about catastrophic disruption, talking about permanent job sector losses.
Yeah, language that implies something unprecedented is happening right now.
But Yale's numbers are saying, yeah, well, the pace looks familiar. It's not a sudden cliff we're falling off. It's more like a slope we've seen before.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Are some leaders genuinely misreading the situation, or perhaps intentionally fueling some of that fear for strategic reasons? Hard to say.
Yeah, it definitely encourages a maybe more critical look at those headlines warning of imminent collapse. If we're tracking at a standard disruption pace, it kind of undermines the idea that, half of all jobs are vanishing next Tuesday.
It certainly suggests a more measured reality, at least for now.
Okay, let's pivot slightly. Because stability in the overall workforce doesn't automatically mean stability for everyone's individual career path.
That's a very important distinction, yes.
So the Yale team also dug into career trajectories. They tracked the occupational distribution, the types of jobs people were in specifically for college graduates. They looked at two groups.
Right. They focused on, first, young adults, ages 20 to 24, basically. People just entering the workforce after college.
Okay, the brand new grads.
And second, a slightly older cohort, ages 25 to 34. People who are a bit more established, but still relatively early in their careers.
And what was the idea behind comparing those two groups?
Well, it's meant to act as a kind of leading indicator. If AI was truly profoundly reshaping the labor market right now, you might expect the newest graduates, the 20 to 24-year-olds, to be forced into or choosing wildly different types of jobs compared to those who graduated just a few years ahead of them.
Makes sense. You'd see the change hit the entry point first. So what did they find initially?
Initially, and this covers most of the 33-month study period, the occupational mix for both the younger and the slightly older cohorts tracked pretty closely.
They matched.
Yeah, suggesting that for most of this period, AI hadn't significantly warped the career paths of recent graduates compared to their immediate predecessors. It looked like more continuity.
Okay, so more evidence for stability, but I sense a but coming.
There is a but, and this is where that stability narrative gets, well, a bit more complicated. There's a wrinkle in the data we really have to pay attention to. You mentioned the study covers 33 months. In the last several months of that period, they detected something interesting. They called it the recent divergence.
The recent divergence. Okay, what does that mean?
It means that established pattern of matching career trajectories started to break down slightly. They identified approximately a 6 percentage point deviation.
6%. How? What was deviating?
The types of jobs the younger cohort, the 20 to 24-year-olds, were getting started to noticeably separate from the types of jobs the 25 to 34-year-old cohort held when they were 2024.
Ah, okay. So the paths started splitting.
Exactly. The occupational distributions began to differ by about 6 percentage points.
Can we clarify what that separation might look like? Are the younger grads suddenly all becoming, I don't know, artisanal bakers? Or just avoiding those high exposure fields we talked about?
Well, the study doesn't specify the exact new fields, unfortunately, but the divergence implies some kind of shift. It suggests that young graduates in those recent months were increasingly moving into a mix of jobs that was different from the cohort just ahead of them.
So maybe moving away from some of those traditional information-heavy entry-level roles, those white-collar jobs often flagged as high exposure.
That's a plausible interpretation, perhaps moving into other areas. Maybe roles needing more face-to-face interaction or physical skills or just jobs that weren't previously the typical first step for a college graduate. But the key is, it's a change.
So is this it? Is this the AI impact finally starting to show up subtly in the data for new entrants? The job elimination we were warned about.
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's the critical uncertainty here.
Right.
The Yale researchers are very careful about this. They state the data isn't sufficient yet to definitively say why this divergence is happening. Causation is unclear.
So it could be other things.
It could. This shift might simply reflect the broader economic conditions. We all know the job market feels unusually challenging right now, especially for entry-level positions. So it could just be graduates adapting to that reality. Or, as you suggest, it could potentially be the very first cautious signal of AI beginning to genuinely shift employment patterns, starting with those just entering the workforce.
So the big picture is stability,
Mm-hmm.
but there's this little flickering light on the dashboard for recent grads.
That's a good way to put it. We have overall stability at the macro level, but this recent divergence means we need to take that zero impact finding with a grain of salt, or at least a caveat that things might be starting to change right now. The story isn't over.
Okay, this brings us squarely to the central paradox we need to try and resolve here. If AI isn't causing massive, measurable job disruption across the board, why does the employment landscape feel so incredibly tough?
Yeah, the feeling is undeniable.
Especially for job seekers trying to get started. There's constant anxiety, and you hear story after story about how scarce entry-level positions seem to be. The anecdotal evidence is just deafening.
And it's not just anecdotal, right?
No, exactly. The source material even mentions a apparently viral chart from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS. It showed job openings absolutely cratering since late 2022, which is right when ChatGPT burst onto the scene.
Right, the timing seems suggestive.
So the jobs are scarcer. That part's real. But the Yale study suggests maybe we're blaming the wrong thing. Correlation isn't causation, perhaps. We might be misdiagnosing the villain here.
And there's a very strong alternative explanation, one favored by many macroeconomists, that has, frankly, nothing to do with deep learning algorithms.
Okay, what is it?
It's all about the central bank, the Federal Reserve connection.
The Fed.
Yes. Many argue that the job market softening aligns far, far better with changes in monetary policy than it does with the timeline of technological innovation like ChatGPT.
Interesting. How so?
Well, think back to the years leading up to 2022. For a long time, the Fed kept interest rates incredibly low, basically zero. The zero interest rate policy, or ZRRP.
Right, ZIRP.
Yeah.
Cheap money everywhere.
Exactly. ZRP meant capital was ridiculously cheap to borrow. So companies, especially high growth, maybe higher risk tech startups, could get massive amounts of funding with almost no penalty.
Okay.
And this fueled a kind of gold rush, didn't it? It created this arguably excess supply of high-paying tech jobs, adjacent white-collar roles, positions that maybe were only really viable because everyone assumed this endless cheap growth would just continue forever.
So we were hiring, like, chief metaverse officers and specialized data analysts funded by money that cost almost nothing to borrow.
You could say that, yeah. Lots of speculative hiring fueled by cheap capital. But then, in 2022, the Fed slammed on the brakes. They started those aggressive interest rate hikes to fight inflation.
And the easy money faucet got turned off.
Abruptly.
Abruptly.
Yeah.
And if you look at the timing, the data analysis shows that the huge drop in job openings aligns much more closely with when those interest rates started going up than it does with the public launch of ChatGPT.
So the argument is, we're confusing the hangover, the painful but necessary economic correction after years of artificially cheap money, with some kind of sudden AI-driven technological catastrophe.
So we're mixing up the, frankly, kind of boring, predictable reality of the bond market and interest rates
Yeah.
with the much sexier, much scarier story of AI stealing all the jobs.
That's a compelling way to frame the alternative explanation, yes. It shifts the perspective quite dramatically.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But beyond just the financial correction, the ZIRP effect,
Yeah.
are there other, maybe longer-term structural things that were already squeezing entry-level jobs, even before the rate hikes really bit?
Oh, absolutely. There are definitely long-standing structural issues that make things harder for new graduates, and these predate the current AI hype.
Like what?
Well, first, there's a basic supply-demand imbalance that's been building for years. We have more people graduating with college degrees, higher degrees even, than ever before. But the number of actual early career positions requiring that specific level of degree or specialization hasn't really kept pace. So you just have intense competition baked into the system from the start, more graduates fighting for relatively fewer suitable entry points.
Right, the funnel neck gets tighter.
Exactly. And furthermore, experts point to fundamental changes in how big companies structure their workforces, changes that also predate generative AI.
Such as?
Things like pushing back against the cost and time involved in training brand new staff. Companies have been increasingly relying on contract workers or outsourcing entry-level functions.
Yeah.
And you also see that phenomenon of entry-level jobs requiring, 3 to 5 years of experience.
Right, the impossible requirement.
Precisely. All these factors were already shrinking the true starting gate for many college graduates, making it harder to get that first foot on the ladder long before ChatGPT was a household name.
And maybe the final insult here, then, is the idea that some CEOs, rather than admitting, oops, we overhired like crazy during the ZIRP boom because money was free, they find it easier now to just point the finger at AI.
That's certainly a conclusion some researchers lean towards. It's plausible.
Blame the robot, not the spreadsheet.
Essentially, yeah. Headlines about AI-related layoffs might, in some cases, just reflect executives jumping prematurely on the hype, as the Yale study subtly suggests. It can be a convenient narrative to justify budget cuts that were probably necessary anyway after that period of excess.
Especially given that, in practice, AI still has limitations.
Right.
And adoption is really uneven across different industries.
Exactly. It's not like every company suddenly implemented advanced AI overnight in November 2022. So, blaming the robot can be politically easier than admitting to past financial decisions or current market realities.
Wow. Okay, this has been a really, really necessary deep dive. It feels like it realigns the whole picture of where the job market actually stands versus where the headlines say it stands. Let's try and summarize the key takeaways from this Yale analysis. First, what's the sort of current reality we should probably hold on to?
Okay, key takeaway one, I'd say, is this. After 33 months of really detailed data, meticulously tracking worker exposure across the economy, AI shows minimal measurable impact on overall employment levels and the composition of the workforce. The widespread fear seems to be running ahead of the current facts on the ground.
Right, minimal impact so far. And what about that historical perspective you mentioned, the part that maybe puts the brakes on the doomsday scenarios?
Yeah, key takeaway too is that context. The observed pace of disruption from AI, at least in terms of how it's changing the job mix, it actually mirrors previous major technology revolutions, specifically the computer era and the internet boom. It's not, as yet, exceeding them in speed or scale in some unprecedented catastrophic way.
So change is happening, but it's more like adapting, like we've done before, rather than instant collapse.
That's what this data suggests. Yes, it's disruption, but maybe historically normal disruption.
Okay. And the study's final word? Is it just, everything's fine, don't worry?
No, definitely not. The final thought is really one of caution, actually. They stress that while generative AI is, without doubt, a truly transformative technology, its longer-term effects are still largely unknown.
Right, that divergence marker.
Exactly. They caution strongly against both extremes. Extreme pessimism based only on hype, and premature certainty based only on the stability we've seen so far. That divergence, however small, suggests we're really only just entering the true experimental phase where things could start to change more noticeably. The long-term impact is still an open question.
Okay, that makes sense. Cautious observation is needed. And that leads perfectly to a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to carry forward, especially as you watch the news, see those headlines, maybe keep an eye on interest rates. Given Yale's analysis and the strong connection they and others draw between the current job market softness and the end of that zero interest rate policy, that ZIRP era, are we truly witnessing a technological catastrophe? Is it really sentient machines coming for our jobs right now? Or are we perhaps just confusing a necessary, maybe painful economic correction after years of excessively cheap money? Confusing that with a completely new kind of world-altering event, something to definitely mull over as you reconsider who or what the real job killer might be right now.